Okay, good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Parrott. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a fairly experienced F9 and P4 tutor, and indeed I've written a number of technical articles which are available on the ACCA website. My aim today is just to teach you a little bit about currency conversion rules. This is an area which always causes confusion. I'm afraid if you're going to do well in any foreign exchange type question, we really ought to be able to convert one currency to another successfully, accurately, and indeed quickly. That's enough, I think, as a little introduction, and that's enough of you seeing my ugly old face. So we'll switch off the camera and we'll get straight into a little bit of a teaching discussion on this area. Good. And so goodbye to the camera and let's carry on. As I said, what are we doing this morning or today? It's currency conversion rules. Good. What could you easily be presented with in the exam? Well, you could be presented with something like this, couldn't you? And it could say dollars to the pound, 1.246 to 1.249. What do we need to be able to do? It's use that currency relationship in order to successfully convert dollars into pounds and pounds into dollars. What are the rules that I would use here? And first of all, some terminology. And I would call, yes, the dollar here, the counter currency. And the pound here, I would call the base currency. And why is that? Well, what does this whole relationship mean? And this means what? It's the number of dollars per £1. And that is the UK convention. And in UK, we always write the base currency second. And the base currency is the one where there's one of them. And hence, as I said, this is the number of dollars per £1. And the counter currency is the currency where the number varies from day to day as the exchange rates vary. I'm afraid in other countries, the convention is to write it the other way round. Because of that, and because the ACCA is an international exam, increasingly examiners are being quite kind. And in questions, they will show you which is the currency, which is the base currency. And he might well write a 1 in here, yes, or express it slightly differently, but show which one is the base currency by showing which currency there is where there's one of the units. Good. Let's assume he's not being nice. Let's assume we're given that. And so here, the first named currency in UK convention is always the counter currency, and the second named currency is the base currency, the currency where there's one of them. What would I then call this? And I would call that the first rate. For obvious reasons, it's named first, and I would call that one the second rate. It's named second. You could call it lower and higher. I don't mind. What are the rules that I would then learn and I would use? And so here, what are the first two? And these are all about whether to multiply or to divide. And what would I say? Sorry, I don't mean to, I mean if. And if converting from what? From the counter currency. Therefore, what do? We divide. And equally, what's rule number 2? Well, fairly obviously, it's the opposite. And so here, if you're converting from the base currency, what do? Well, therefore, we multiply. Very often, rule number 1 and rule number 2 don't cause great problems, because as long as you know the relationship between the currencies, we tend to get this right. And for instance, I know that there's always more US dollars than pounds, hopefully. And therefore, that makes it much easier when I'm having to do a conversion. It's fairly logical. It's easy to see which is the right way to go. And very often, especially at P4, what could the examiner give you? It's a currency where you don't know the relationship, or indeed a made-up currency where, of course, you don't know the relationship, and hence you must know the rules. Rules 3 and 4 are all about which rates to use. And these are perhaps more important. This is the area that causes the biggest confusion. There's many ways of looking at this, and what do I talk about? And I talk about what I'm doing to the counter currency. And I simply say, if I'm buying the counter currency, what will I do? Well, therefore, we use the first rate. And what's the opposite of buying? Well, it's selling, isn't it? And so I would say, if I'm selling the counter currency, what would I do? Well, I would use the second rate. And that's the area where people tend to have problems and where people tend to go wrong. Good. Those are the rules, yes, that I have refined over years and refused, and that's what I would use. Let's now have a little practice using those. And so let's first of all bring forward that currency relationship we had. And what did I say previously? And I think we had the dollar to the pound, with the dollar as the counter currency and the pound as the base currency, 1.246 to 1.249. And let's now use that. Let's have a couple of little examples. What's the first thing we'll say? And so example number 1. And let's say we're a UK company and we receive or receives $10,000. What's the question? It's how many pounds? Question mark. Well, what are you? You're a UK company, you're receiving dollars, you don't like dollars, you want pounds, and so you're going to convert the dollars into pounds. And remember, the dollar here is the counter currency, and what have we said? If you're converting from the counter currency, what do? Rule number 1, we divide, and so it's a divide. As I said, we know there should be less pounds than dollars, and therefore it's logical to divide. What do we then have to think about? It's what we're going to be doing to the counter currency, what we're going to be doing to the dollar. And here, you're a UK company, you receive dollars, you don't like dollars, and so what are you going to do to them? You're going to sell them in order to get pounds. And what did I say? If you're selling the counter currency, what do we want to do? It's use the second rate. And so here, divide by the 1.249. If you stick that through your calculator, how many pounds will we end up with? And I think that becomes, to the nearest pound, 8,006. Good. Let's do one more. And this time, what shall we say? And let's say we're a US company. And here they receive, and let's keep the numbers different, £20,000. And what's the question? Well, it's how many dollars? Question mark. Good. And this time, what's the scenario? A US company is receiving pounds. Well, they don't like pounds, and so what are they going to be doing? And they will be getting rid of the pounds, selling the pounds in order to get the dollars, the currency they do want. Let's do the currency conversion. And what's the first thing to say to ourselves? Well, what are we doing here? We're converting from the pound, and the pound is the base currency. And what does rule number 2 say? If you're converting from the base currency, it's a multiply. What should we then say to ourselves? And here you have to think a little bit carefully. We must think, what are we doing to the counter currency? And remember, the counter currency is still the dollar. And here, what are we doing? Well, the US company is receiving pounds. They don't like pounds. And so what are they going to be doing to the pound? They're selling the pound. However, we must think, what are they doing to the dollar? And if they're selling the pound, what are they doing to the dollar? They're buying the dollar, aren't they? And they're buying dollars with those pounds. And what does rule And number 3, say, and it says if we're buying the counter currency, what do we use? And we use the first rate. And so I think that comes to how many dollars? And I think that is 24,920. 24,920. Good. Just a little note. As I said, very often, whether you're dividing or multiplying is fairly logical and straightforward. And people find that a little bit easier to get right and don't tend to have such problems with that. If you're unsure about the rates to use, what can you always do? And you can always use both rates if necessary. And here, what could we say? In example 2, if you weren't sure which rate to use, you could have simply said, okay, let's do the sums with both the rates. And what is the alternative rate available? It's the 1.249. And if you multiply that up, what do you get? Well, you get, I think, $24,980. And then what do you say to yourself? If you're the US company, what would you prefer to receive? And would you prefer the 24,980 or the 24,920? And quite obviously, you would prefer the 24,980. And therefore, that is the one the bank doesn't give you. And if you like, yes, you get the one which is worse for you, and you don't get the one which is good for you. And what's the little note, if you like? And we can say what? Note. The bank wins, and therefore you lose. The bank is not in business because they love you. The bank is in business to make money out of you. And it's the spread on the currency rates that enables them to make money out of you. Good. That's the methodology that I would use when I'm converting from one currency to another. And however confusing the situation is, if you apply those rules, you should be able to fight through and come to the correct answer. And I'm afraid far too many people learn rules which are bad or have a methodology which doesn't work well, and it falls down. And I'm afraid, especially at P4, once you're doing currency conversions, if you can't even do a basic currency conversion, your marker very much loses faith with you. Just a couple of other thoughts before I run away. Sometimes people learn rules where they talk about home currency and overseas currency. And I'm afraid I don't particularly like that, because very often in P4 especially, the scenario can be quite confusing as to what is the home currency, what is the overseas currency, and what else. You know, in the examiner's formula sheet that you're given in the exam, for things like interest rate parity theory and purchasing power parity theory, you need to understand what is the counter currency and what is the base currency. And so why not use those terms here? And then you become very familiar with those terms, and they're easy for you to use when you have to use them. What else? Very often in textbooks, the rules are written from the bank's point of view. It seems to be the tradition. But once again, I'm afraid I don't think that's useful to you, because in your exam, I don't think you'll ever be a bank. You'll be a company using the services of the bank. And hence these rules have very much been written from our point of view, and they're useful for us. And once again, that's what I'd learn. What's the final little point I'd make? You need to learn your currency conversion rules in F9. And in F9, sometimes what does the examiner do? And he might say, you know, e.g., and this time, let's say it's euros to the pound, 1.11 to 1.12. And you might have that sort of spread. Good. And, oh, sorry, if we can cut that out, that would be good. And you might say what? Let's cut all of that out. Hopefully you can edit this for me. Let's go back. There's one other thing I'd like to say, and what is that? Within F9, how might the examiner give you the currency relationship? And he might say something like this, e.g., euros to the pound, 1.11 plus or minus 0.01. I'm sorry, that should be plus or minus 0.01. What do you have to do with that? Well, from that, you have to be able to calculate and create the spread. And how do we do that? Well, the rule to remember is you do the minus first. And so here, what would you have? It's euro to the pound. And first of all, we do the minus. And so that's going to become 1.10. And then we do the plus. And so what will that be? 1.12. And suddenly, what have you got? You've got a spread in exactly the same way as we've just been using in the previous example. The first rate is the 1.10, and the second rate is the 1.12. And here, what is the counter currency? Well, it's the first named currency, it's the euro. And what is the base currency? Well, it's the second named currency, it's the pound, isn't it? And what does this relationship mean? It's the number of euros to £1, isn't it? The number of euros to £1. As I said, once you've got the spread, the rules are exactly the same as before. Okay, that's a short little session on how to do currency conversions and the methodologies that I would use. Let me just try and switch the camera back on again. Good, there we go. Hopefully that's useful. Please, yes, learn a methodology that enables you to accurately and quickly convert from one currency to another without just constantly guessing. Because if you can't do that, I'm afraid you're constantly throwing away the easy marks, and we simply can't afford to do that, especially in P4. I hope that's useful for you. If you'd like to learn anything more, get in touch with me, then do so through the Core Pros website, and I'm very happy to talk on both F9 and P4. All the best for now. Best of luck with your studies.